Welcome back. For this week's Think Tank Central, we're joined from New Delhi by Alvite Ningtoljam, an expert on Israeli-Indian military ties. And with me in the studio is Dr. Shalom Wald, Senior Fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, who co-authored a new book called India, Israel, and the Jewish People. Welcome, gentlemen. Dr. Wald, let's start with you in the bigger picture. You chart in your book India's growing involvement in the Middle East and note that beyond its primary interest in energy, this dangerous neighborhood has created a convergence of interests with Israel vis-a-vis the common threat of radical Islam. Please explain.
True. In the last 20 years, India marched into the Middle East in quiet but still giant steps. Today, India has 7 million workers in the Middle East. Its trade with the whole Middle East is twice its trade with China, twice its trade with the United States, which has created enormous links, economic links, financial links, etc., etc. And at the same time, India became more and more victim of Islamic terrorism, not directly from the Middle East, but from its immediate neighbor. And so has Israel been attacked by terrorism, so by Muslim Islamic terrorism, Arab terrorism. So this has created a convergence of strategic interests between the two countries and the will to cooperate in technological, political and other means to thwart and fight terrorism.
Well, in your book, you characterize Modi's election in 2014 as a watershed for Israeli-Indian ties. And you note that after decades of very tacit strategic cooperation in the shadows, now things are unapologetically out in the open.
Absolutely. And Modi is a revolution. His election has destroyed an old taboo of Indian politics, which was that a friend of Israel can't be the leader of India because India has to be very careful with Muslim sensitivities. And Modi has shown that you can be a friend of Israel and the leader of India and be elected by a large majority and maintain all the best links you had before with the Muslim world. That's interesting that India has been able to do a balancing act where today the Muslim world does not make its relationship with India dependent on India's attitude towards Israel.
You should note the 15% of the population which is Muslim.
The Muslim population has not moved, has not protested, has not rioted when Modi turned towards Israel. Maybe they didn't like it, but Modi has been very careful also to include his Muslim population into his plans. He spoke to them. And
Dr. Wald, let's take it over to Alvite in Delhi. And Alvite, Israeli-Indian defense trade has averaged nearly $1 billion over the past several years. And under Modi, we're seeing a lot bigger and much more prominent deals. How so?
It is because of the relationship has come out much stronger than how it was before. The nature of the arms cooperation or the defense cooperation between India and Israel is very comprehensive at the moment. Earlier, there were lots of innovations about coming out in the public, but at the same time, under the new government, ever since in May 2014, we are attaining that level of comfort between the two countries in dealing with the Israelis. So since defense cooperation has been the mainstay of our relationship from the past many, many years, this is bound to happen. And this was, in fact, the kind of perceptions people had at the moment when Modi was elected as the Prime Minister of India. And defense was one that is getting a very, very heavy push at the moment now.
And it's much more than defense trade, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, apart from the military deals, yes, there are some expectations about some sort of deals to be signed between the two governments during the visit of our Prime Minister to Israel. But it is difficult to say on which categories the deals would be signed. But it will be more on missile systems, anti-missile systems, border protection equipments and technologies. Apart from the joint collaborations we have come having for the last many years, and with this Make in India project, which is ongoing in India, it's going to be we're going to see further improvements in this regard.
Dr. Wald.
Yes.
Now, despite the ever-growing strategic cooperation between India and Israel. India, at the same time, is cultivating what it has called a strategic partnership with Iran, and it's also deepening its ties, military ties, particularly naval ties, with the Sunni states in the Gulf.
India's relations with the Sunni states are very strong, and they get better. India has succeeded to walk a fine line between Iran and the Sunni states, with very careful indications that India is more and more turning towards the Sunni world, towards Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Now, both the Sunni Arabs and the Iranians need India. They need India as a market. You know that the geopolitical situation has completely changed because of fracking. Today, India does not more depend on the oil producers than the oil producers depend on India. Not just India, but Asia. Without Asia, the oil producers have no market. They can't sell in America. They don't sell in Europe. It's Asia which is essential for their survival. And at the same time, they know that India has been a giant neighbor for 2,000 years and will remain a neighbor.
Let's stop at this juncture and throw it back to Alvite. And India has increased its activity here in the region, all through the Med, west coast of Africa, into the Persian Gulf. Do you expect all this to be even more enhanced under Modi?
We will have to see that. Like, naval cooperation has picked up over the period of time with Israel. That is one thing of all the apart from buying the equipments for the naval forces, like the sort of military cooperation, especially on the naval cooperation, it's still not that very strong. I'm not saying that it is bad or low, but there needs to be more work done on that regard. So I wouldn't be surprised in the days to come if we see more of an exchanges between the two units.
Dr. Wald, in your book, you note over the decades India's activity under the auspices of the UN in various peacekeeping missions here in this region, from the Suez Canal to the border of Lebanon, where in 2000, under the nose of Indian forces, Hezbollah kidnapped 3 Israeli soldiers. Now, Israel has a terrible impression of peacekeepers, and how, if at all, is this influencing Israeli-Indian ties?
It does not influence Indian-Israeli ties at all. People in the Middle East, not only Israelis, the whole Middle East doesn't see UN troops with their blue helmets as Indians of Fiji or Indonesians, etc., etc. Nobody knows exactly where the Indians are. I'm not sure they are in Lebanon. You said under the nose. There were no Indian troops, no UN troops around when the 3 Israeli boys were kidnapped. So I see no link whatsoever with India's peacekeeping efforts under UN umbrella and the Middle East's attitude towards India and vice versa. Well, I think this is completely disjointed.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shalom Wald and Alvite Ningtojam. Thanks for joining us at Strictly Security. And coming up, Israel's defense trade with India predates by decades the establishment of formal bilateral ties. Stay with us for a report on its evolution from the shadows under Nehru and Gandhi to the broad sunlight it enjoys today under Prime Minister Modi.